Decades ago, American football surpassed baseball as the most popular sport in the United States. And today, football is way ahead in popularity. It's not even close. How did that happen? Why does it continue today? And why is it probably not going to change in the future? That's what we're talking about here today. Baseball was the biggest sport in America from the time it became professional in the 1870s all the way through the 1960s, about a century of rule over the American sports landscape. One thing that cannot be taken away from baseball is that it was the first professional sport to rule the country. But some big changes occurred in the second half of the 20th century that would cause baseball to lose its place forever. Gallup has been conducting a poll on America's favorite sports since 1937. In that year, baseball was named as the favorite sport by 34% of respondents, while football was named by 23%. And in another poll taken in 1948, baseball's lead over football actually grew, 39% to 17%. Another poll in 1960 showed baseball with a smaller yet comfortable lead. Then, in 1972, the tide had turned dramatically. Football, 38% to 19% over baseball. I know Gallup polls aren't the end-all measurement of anything, but anything else you look at seems to reflect the drastic change seen in the polls at that time. Such a huge change in just 10 years. American sports preferences continue to change today, but not in such dramatic fashion. In fact, the same Gallup poll taken this year shows football at 41%, not much different from 1972. Baseball is at 10%, basketball 9%. Baseball and basketball have been about dead even since 1995, so really not much has changed at all. But in the 1950s and 60s, some major changes in America caused the country's two most popular sports to flip positions. The biggest one would have to be television. It started to become common in American households in the 50s, and color TV came out in the early 60s. They didn't know it at the time, but TV would prove to be baseball's biggest enemy, not just in the US, but all around the world. Following the war, baseball had started to become a successful minority sport in many countries, especially in Europe. Before TV, people would often go to the local sports ground to catch a game. They had their favorite sports, of course, but they'd settle for whatever was being played nearby. Baseball games were attracting the curiosity of local sports fans, most of whom had never seen it before the war. That all changed with TV. Now they could watch their favorite sports, especially soccer, from the comfort of their own homes. There was no room for baseball on TV because there were only a few channels. For this reason, the most popular sports thrived in every country for the rest of the 20th century, while minor sports faded into near non-existence, baseball included. But that's in other countries. We're talking about America here. Baseball was number one in the US, so based on what happened in other countries, you'd expect baseball to strengthen its position even further. But baseball just isn't visually appetizing when it's restricted to a rectangular screen. The most common camera angle shows 4 guys, and one of them isn't even a player. 7 guys on the field we can't even see, so they seem kind of irrelevant. Contrast that with football, a sport played on a rectangular field, matching the TV screen. Viewers at home can see all or almost all of the players on the field. The ball moves from left to right or right to left, and the camera moves right along with it. You don't miss anything. Watching football on TV was pretty much how you'd view it if you were there in person. But when watching baseball on TV, you lose so much of the viewing experience. When you're there in the bleachers, you can see the outfielders chasing after the ball, while one runner is rounding first, another runner is rounding third, and all the infielders are getting in position. But on TV, this isn't possible. One part of the action is all you get. Baseball fared better in the days of radio broadcasting in the 20s, 30s, and 40s. If you know how baseball is played, and the announcer is doing a good job, you can get a pretty clear picture in your head of what's happening on the field. Football had a harder time with this. It's harder to describe exactly what's going on, and the complex terms used for describing plays would have been a turnoff for casual listeners. But when sports broadcasts went visual, football became easier to understand. This change wasn't unique to the United States. In the United Kingdom around this time, association football, soccer as we know it, surpassed cricket in popularity, another bat and ball sport being pushed aside in favor of a football sport. Baseball did retain its top spot in other countries, though. In Japan, the sport got even bigger during this time, but that's because baseball was the only major professional sport. The Professional Soccer League wasn't established till the 1990s, and by that time a couple generations had grown up watching baseball on TV. They wouldn't be so easily lured away by a more visually appealing product. In the Caribbean, I can't say for sure why baseball held on to the top spot. Maybe TV didn't become common until much later, or maybe they retained their habit of going out to watch sports live rather than watching on a screen. I know I've got some viewers from the Caribbean on this channel. If you got an answer to that, please comment down below. So TV was the biggest reason for football overtaking baseball. There are other, smaller reasons, but none of those explain why the change was so sudden. Some say it was a new generation with new tastes. Sports change just like the music. But music changes with every generation, whereas football and baseball are still 1 and 2 more than 50 years later, so I don't think that was it. Another small reason was the shift in population away from the Northeast and Midwest, where all the MLB teams were located. One thing that Gallup never includes in its polls, and I wish they did, is how football and baseball's popularity has differed by region. No data on this, but it's very likely that football has always been the number one sport in the South. And I'm talking about watching, not playing. While the Northeast had Yankees, Red Sox, the Midwest had Cubs, Cardinals, the South had Alabama versus Auburn, and other great rivalries. Baseball is a sport of traditions and rivalries, but so is college football. And for Southerners, MLB had to be viewed from a distance. College football was close by. But most of the population shift has occurred since 1970. It's helped to further solidify football's place at the top, but it wasn't responsible for the initial change. Besides, the southeastern state's share of the U.S. population has only grown from 21 to 26% in that time. How has football been able to grow its lead? Well, despite improvements in the viewing experience for baseball, football is still a lot more TV friendly. But that's not the main reason. The biggest thing keeping football on top is scheduling. It was decided a long time ago that baseball would be played every day, with teams playing 154 games a season, now at 162. Football, meanwhile, would be played on weekends, with about a tenth of the number of games played as baseball. The advantage for Major League Baseball is that they'll always lead the world in total attendance. More is better, right? Seemed like a good idea at the time. If people wanted to watch, they had to go to the ballpark. Why not make it available every day? That was over a century ago. The leaders of the baseball world couldn't have imagined making money from people watching from home. Football couldn't be played every day. Like baseball has a pitching rotation, football would need a rotation for almost every position, so it wouldn't work. This was a major disadvantage in the first half of the 20th century. They couldn't possibly keep up with baseball in total attendance. But when TVs started to appear in every home, the two sports were competing for 1,000 times more viewers than any stadium could fill. And while baseball was an everyday thing, miss it today, you can always catch it tomorrow, football became an event, something to look forward to, something they could build up excitement for. The first Super Bowl was played in 1966, a single-game championship on a Sunday when most people have the day off. So much easier to get all of America's attention for that single-day championship than it is to draw viewers to the World Series, which could go to as many as 7 games, and the deciding game could be on a Wednesday. College football, too, played once a week on Saturday, everyone can watch, and a series of bowl games to end the season on New Year's Day. And college teams had the support of the whole student body, and sometimes the whole state. As I said before, college football had its own traditions and rivalries that were just as old as professional baseball. And unlike with professional sports, this wasn't restricted to large cities. It was something that every state could share in. All the best 18 to 22-year-old football players played in college, and someone from a mostly rural state could root on some of the best young players in the country before they went on to an NFL career. College baseball did not have the same thing. Played in the spring and early summer when students are getting out of school and going home. The best young ball players were split between college and the minor leagues, so college baseball wasn't as big of a deal, didn't attract the same size crowds. Minor league baseball gave rural states a chance to see some of the best young athletes before they reached the big leagues, especially if they had a AAA team, but it wasn't the same. With college football, you had a team full of players who would be with the team for at least 3 and usually 4 years, from the start of the season till the end, hoping to lead their school, sometimes with the support of an entire state, to a national championship. With a AAA team, you get a young future star playing in your state for maybe a year. His mission from the moment he gets there is not to win a championship, but to get out of there as soon as possible. The team could be making a title run, but if he gets the call up to the big league team, he'll bail as soon as he can. No regrets about abandoning the team, and he'll hope he never has to return to your little city ever again. So neither college baseball nor minor league baseball will ever be able to compete with college football. All said and done, baseball is at a major disadvantage compared with football. Fewer games mean that the games are more important, so football games draw more viewers. Games on weekends versus games every day. College football bigger than college baseball and minor league baseball combined. And of course the thing that got it all started, TV, which football is so much better suited for. Is there a chance that baseball could make a comeback and become America's favorite pastime once again? I'd have to say no. For all the reasons I've already given, football will remain well ahead of baseball. And no, baseball couldn't possibly follow football's model, playing once a week on Saturday or Sunday. Then you'd have every team putting their ace on the mound every single game. There'd be a lot of scoreless ties going into extra innings. Baseball's just different. It needs to be played daily rather than weekly. Could another sport possibly surpass football for number one? Possibly. Basketball seems to have the best chance. It's a TV-friendly sport. College basketball is a big deal. But the NBA, like MLB, also has a long schedule. Not every game is played on the weekend. And it's an indoor sport. Not only does that restrict the crowd size, but people tend to prefer outdoor sports. Around the world, very few countries have an indoor sport as their national pastime. Soccer could possibly climb to the top one day. It's become a major sport in America now, one of the big five. If it does someday become number one, I don't think it'll gradually work its way to the top from where it's at now. It's going to take something that'll revolutionize the sports viewing experience, like TV did 60 years ago. Hard to imagine it happening anytime soon, but I'm sure people living in the 1950s could not have imagined baseball being dethroned so quickly. Anyway, that's all for this one. Until next time, this is Baseball International. See ya!